This is one of our very first pattern making videos, and so as a starting point we're going to deal with that interesting and sometimes problematic area of dart transfer. And so I will be using the Studio Faro fitted block, and just to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's a very tailored fitted block. As you can see, the front is much bigger than the back. In this particular draft, the side seam is pushed towards the back. Starting here, we have the centre front, and this represents a half of the front of the garment and a quarter of the body. From the centre front, we can go to the bust point, and from the bust point you will see you have a shoulder dart, and this is the shaping for the bust area. Below the bust point we have a waist dart, which is about waistline shaping. Through to the side seam, front and back have got similar shaping, and then on the back we have a shoulder dart, which is really quite sort of tailored way of accounting for the shape of the shoulder blade. In commercial work this is rarely used, however when we go through to jackets this is very, very important. Going through to the back waist dart, coming from under the shoulder blade to the waist, then down towards the hip. And this is our centre back line, the very centre of the back. And so when you look at this, you are looking at half the final garment. Books or in block drafting books, you will notice that it is very common for them to draft the bodice stopping at the waist. And then at some time later they get you to draft a skirt and you attach the two things together. My experience in the industry says that this block is most useful to me when the beginning of the skirt or the lower half of the shirt or dress is already attached to the bodice. It is most useful to me in this form, and so whenever I draft a basic block, it is always from the shoulder to the waist down to the hip. I will use this basic block for all of my shirts, all of my dresses. I'll make a bias dress block out of it. I would make a corset block out of it. I would then make some major alterations and turn it into a jacket block. So it's really fundamental to the fitting of majority of garments for the upper body. What we'll deal with here today, working with this block, is the transfer of this shoulder dart. This shoulder dart is here in a sort of very balanced, although unattractive position, running from the bust point to the shoulder, to achieve the fit for the bust itself. If we look at our clothing, most of the time this dart is in the underarm. And so that will be our first move. I will trace this fitted block and then demonstrate how I can move my dart from my shoulder to my underarm without too much fuss. So one point I do need to make about my blocks, and I didn't earlier on, is that I don't use seam allowances on my block. So often this is what you're looking at. You're looking at my notations, and where you would normally put the cutting instructions for a garment, I put NSA, no seam allowances. A seam allowance for me gets determined when I have finished cutting the pattern and I'm thinking about machinery and I'm thinking about the fabric I'm cutting it in, not at this early block stage. When you consider that this block will become a corset, may become a jacket, certainly will be a dress and a shirt, depending on the market you're working into or the quality of the fabric you're using, the seam allowances will vary. So seam allowances later, never at the block stage for me, too confusing. And so to begin this work, I will make a copy of the fitted block, working from the centre front line around the neck into the shoulder line, and this is the bust dart, or the dart that gives us our bust shaping. Around the armhole, marking in the balance curve, the balance notch rather, halfway, around about halfway down the armhole. Side seam, waist notch, down to hip level. Back to the centre front line. I will need to mark all the drill holes for the darts, and just a small mark on the centre front here for squaring on my waistline. So in this video I've decided to work with pens, although in pattern making it's always pencil for me and I never like any pens near pattern making. When it comes to this videoing of the process, the pencil is sometimes difficult to see. So just once again, I'm going to go over the geography of this block. This is our neckline. This is our centre front line down the very middle of the garment. Squaring out from the centre front line, we have our bust point. The shaping that's pointing at the bust point is our shoulder dart. It creates the shape for our bust. Waistline with the waist dart for the front, placed directly under the bust dart towards the hip, and usually this end of dart is at least 5 centimeters away from the hip line. So this is our waistline and this is our hip line. Coming along the hip line, up over our hip, that lovely round shape, into our waist, through to our underarm point. Round the armhole with our notch, our front notch at the middle, or shall we say balance point or pitch point of the armhole and sleeve. Back up to the shoulder line, bust dart, back to the neck. And so this first demonstration of dart transfer, I'm going to take the dart from the shoulder and put it into the underarm. Now, putting in the angle of this line, there are no rules as to exactly how angled or straight it should be. I will say to you that if you put a dart exactly horizontal to the bust point, it is makes a very, very unattractive dart, because it sort of darts out visually from the underarm and points directly in front. It's most unattractive. So I would not put it straight across there. Equally, I would not be as angled as going all the way to the waist, because by this stage you're on 45-degree angle and you're sewing on the bias. All you need is a little bit of poor sewing and not a particularly good factory, and you've got roping on your front dart. So I am going to suggest somewhere between the waist and that bust level. Halfway is fine. And so this is the position of our new dart, and I'm going to cut in here with my scissors so that when I fold out and remove this shoulder dart, it opens up into the side seam. And so the method I'm using is referred to the cut and paste method, so you can physically see the paper move. Cut in along that new bust line. And so in order to get the dart from here to here, I have to close the existing dart. And so convention says usually that we would fold the dart arm closest to the centre front, so that the bulk of the dart at the back heads towards the centre front. And so crease that first dart arm and bring it across to the other dart arm, totally eliminating the shoulder dart. Put a little glue in there. It's gone. Now, because we worked that change through that pivot point, all of our shaping is now here in our underarm. And so all I need is a little bit of paper at the back here, and I can finish my underarm dart. Taken it from here, we've transferred it into the underarm. And now the only thing we have to deal with is this sort of lack of definition here at the end of the dart. We need a very specific shape to make this dart work, to get it to sit into our side seam correctly. The first thing is to mark in the true length of the dart. With this bust point, we certainly do pivot all our darts through that bust point, but we don't sew our darts to the bust point. We sew our darts away from the bust point. And so that's because if we did sew them all the way up to here, we'd end up with these little pointy things on the front of our shirts, which would be most unattractive. So as a standard, we would come back from the bust point by 3 centimetres. And the only time I would vary that standard is if it was for a much bigger size. I might go a little further back, or a much bigger bust. I'll go a little further back. So the end of the dart, 3 centimetres away from the bust point, and then put in your new dart arms from the side seam. Now, to get this shape, I actually need to fold that dart, and there's a convention with side seams darts, as much as there is with the shoulder dart, that I would like the back of the dart, that's the fold that's on the inside of the garment, to face downward. And to do that, I will need to crease the lower dart arm first, because I intend to bring these two together. Now you'll notice that this is a 2-dimensional pattern and we are making a 3-dimensional shape. When I try and push these together, the paper fights me a little bit. So there is a small thing that you can do to make the paper behave itself. If you fold perpendicular to the dart, along the dart end, you'll find that this behaves itself far more easily. Don't fight so much with your pattern. Bring those two dart arms together, and using this needle point tracing wheel, I can copy the side seam shaping through to the other layers of the dart. And this is so that when it's sewn, all of the edges, the garment and the dart inside, get caught in the side seam. And what I have here are puncture marks that are exactly this shape. And so once I have run the tracing wheel through all the layers, it gives me an exact outside edge shape. When it comes to doing a pattern, it's here that I would add on my seam allowances. So let's say it's a centimetre seam allowance. It would look like that. Just according to whatever garment you're making and what machinery you're using. So for the next example, I think I'm going to do something a little bit more design and function rather than just function. And take this shoulder, this bust dart that's in the shoulder position into the front neck.